Well, the gods of the old world never truly died. Across cathedrals and Christian rituals, in symbols we barely question, echoes of ancient deities still whisper. They weren't erased, only transformed, renamed, repurposed. Behind every candle lit, every feast celebrated, and every image venerated lies a deeper story, one that predates Christianity by centuries. This is not about faith. It's about memory and what history dares not say aloud. If you're drawn to the forbidden, the forgotten, and the sacred secrets buried beneath the altar, subscribe, like, and join us. Because what you're about to see might change how you view religion forever. In the year 391 AD, Emperor Theodosius I issued a decree that forever changed the spiritual landscape of the Western world. With one stroke, the public practice of paganism across the Roman Empire was outlawed. Temples were shuttered. Sacrifices banned. The Olympian gods, once revered by millions, were declared illegal. It seemed like the end of an era. But history, as always, is more complex than a royal edict. Christian expansion in late antiquity did not sweep the old gods away as cleanly as it claimed. Missionaries traveled not just with scripture, but with strategy. Temples weren't merely destroyed. Many were repurposed, rededicated to saints whose stories bore suspicious similarities to the gods they replaced. Jupiter's grandeur was inherited by St. Peter. Diana's wild sanctuaries became Marian shrines. In places like Gaul and Britannia, the resistance was subtle but persistent. Locals clung to the rhythms of the solstice and equinox, to fertility rites and sacred wells. The church, rather than fighting each tradition outright, often cloaked it in new vestments. Sacred groves became churchyards. Festivals of Saturnalia were reborn as Christmas celebrations. The idea that Christianity obliterated paganism is a convenient myth, one promoted to establish dominance, not accuracy. What actually happened was a transformation. The old gods were not slain, they were baptized. And so begins our journey, not through what was destroyed, but through what survived, hidden in plain sight. In the midst of post-Roman Europe, as Christianity spread across once pagan lands, the people's faith did not vanish overnight. It morphed. In fact, the church quickly learned that if it could not eradicate the old beliefs, it would have to sanctify them. Consider Bridget. To the Celts, she was a goddess of fertility, poetry, and healing, celebrated with fire festivals and rites of spring. But by the 5th century, a Christian Saint Bridget emerged born. Curiously, on the very day the goddess had been honored for centuries. The attributes remained: flames, motherhood, sacred wells. Only the name changed, and she wasn't alone. In Greece and Rome, Apollo's healing powers found echoes in Saint Raphael. Demeter, the goddess of harvest and mourning, lived on through Marian devotion in southern Europe. The sorrowful mother cradling her son beneath the harvest moon. The strategy was clear: replace gods with saints, temples with churches, myths with hagiographies. The Roman Empire may have collapsed, but its pantheon lingered, clothed now in Christian robes. Even their feast days were preserved, cloaked in holy calendars. This wasn't deception. It was adaptation, a calculated syncretism that allowed the church to root itself into pagan soil without pulling up its old roots. But these echoes weren't just superficial. They shaped theology, iconography, and spiritual practice, blending the old world and the new. And the next layer to uncover lies not in people, but in what surrounds them: symbols. What if even the signs we revere today still speak the language of forgotten gods? The cross, the halo, the chalice, the shepherd's crook. We recognize them instantly as Christian symbols, sacred emblems of the faith. But their origins often predate Christ by centuries. Take the halo, for instance. Long before Christian saints were painted with radiant crowns, sun gods like Helios and Mithras were depicted with golden discs behind their heads, symbols of divinity and cosmic power. The visual language endured, only the names changed. Even the cross has deeper roots. In ancient Egypt, the ankh, a cross with a loop, symbolized life and immortality. In pre-Christian Rome, similar shapes were used in rituals for Tammuz and Bacchus. It wasn't the form that changed, it was the interpretation. Festivals like Christmas and Easter mirror pagan solstice celebrations. December 25th was long held as the birthdate of Sol Invictus, the unconquered sun. Easter's very name may stem from Easter, a Germanic goddess of spring, whose festivals involved eggs and rabbits as fertility symbols. Vestments, incense, altars, and bells, all borrowed, transformed, sanctified. The church didn't erase the visual language of paganism. It co-opted it, giving old symbols new meanings. Yet the resonance of these images runs deep, perhaps because the human soul recognizes them not as foreign, but as ancient truths dressed in new garments. But the symbols were just one part of the transformation. In the halls of power, a more strategic fusion was unfolding, a fusion that would reshape empires and canonize compromise. The year was 313 AD. The Roman Emperor Constantine issued the Edict of Milan, granting religious tolerance to Christians throughout the empire. But tolerance was only the beginning. Within a decade, Christianity would become the empire's favored faith, and the once persecuted religion would now sit at the throne of power. This wasn't merely theological. It was political. At the Council of Nicaea in 325 AD, Constantine convened bishops from across the empire to unify doctrine. But more importantly, he unified symbols, rituals, and calendars, merging state and sacred into one imperial ideology. Pagan holidays were assimilated, not abolished. Temples were rededicated, not erased. The emperor himself, once styled after Jupiter and Sol Invictus, now patronized the church. His authority passed from divine lineage to divine endorsement. Rome had fallen, but the spirit of its gods lingered in marble columns and feast days. The bishops wore robes like senators. The cathedrals rose where the temples once stood. And the masses, who had prayed to Saturn and Cybele, now knelt before saints whose faces and festivals felt hauntingly familiar. This wasn't a conquest of ideas. It was a pact. By absorbing pagan structure, Christianity didn't just survive, it flourished, but at a cost. The faith that claimed to reject idols found itself surrounded by them, cloaked in incense and liturgy, echoing rites that had once been declared blasphemy. And from this fusion emerged a new religious machine, one that retained the heart of empire while wearing the robes of piety. But belief is not built on power alone. It must live in action, which is where the rites come in. To the untrained eye, a baptism may seem uniquely Christian, a sacred initiation into faith through water, but the ritual's roots run far deeper. In the ancient world, ceremonial washings were widespread. Followers of Isis immersed themselves in water for purification. The Essenes, a Jewish sect preceding Jesus, practiced daily immersion rites. Baptism, it seems, was not born with John the Baptist. It was inherited. Communion, too, echoes earlier traditions. In Mithraic mysteries, initiates symbolically consumed the flesh and blood of bull, a divine sacrifice. Dionysian rites included wine drinking and ecstatic feasting, celebrating rebirth through consumption. Christianity adapted these forms, transforming blood sacrifice into spiritual remembrance, but the structure remained familiar to ancient worshippers. Even the hierarchical structure of the church mirrored Rome. The Pope as Pontifex Maximus, bishops as provincial governors, priests as local magistrates, all wore garments with imperial resonance. The crozier, the mitre, the vestments, each with roots in pre-Christian ceremony and statecraft. Processions, relics, and pilgrimages, these, too, were lifted from older paths. Pagan festivals often involved sacred journeys, offerings to ancestral spirits, and the veneration of holy objects. The bones of saints replaced statues of gods, but the impulse to connect with the divine through touch and travel persisted. What the church did was brilliant. It didn't fight the deep instincts of ritual. It baptized them. It gave new names to ancient acts. Yet, even today, many believers perform rites without knowing their origin. And perhaps that's the point. Ritual is memory encoded in action, and in every gesture, the old gods still move. But what of the present? Have these shadows truly faded, or do they still shape the way we live and worship today? Walk through a Christmas market in Germany, or attend an Easter Mass in Rome, and you'll witness it. Ancient traditions pulsing beneath modern faith. Paganism never vanished. It evolved, embedding itself in customs, celebrations, and even language. Yule logs, mistletoe, and the burning of candles during winter festivals originate from Nordic and Roman solstice rituals. The idea of decorating trees, a remnant of fertility worship, repurposed for Christian cheer. Even the concept of rebirth each spring, so centered to Easter, reflects agricultural cycles once presided over by goddesses like Easter and Demeter, but it goes deeper than decor and dates. The psychological structure of belief, the yearning for intercession, for seasonal renewal, for contact with the sacred, all echo instincts older than any church. Saints are still prayed to like household gods. Relics are still sought for protection. Processions wind through cities as they once did for Isis and Dionysus. And the archetypes, the mother, the martyr, the king, the healer, haven't changed. Only their names have. Modern Christianity, particularly in its Catholic and Orthodox branches, is a living museum of syncretism, a hybrid faith shaped by emperors, missionaries, and mystics, but also by druids, shamans, and priests of forgotten pantheons. So the question remains, are we truly monotheistic in practice, or do we still bow unknowingly to a pantheon dressed in new robes? And if so, who are we really worshiping? The answer might lie not in the heavens, but in the past, whispering to the final veil of faith. What we call religion is often a tapestry, a weaving together of stories, symbols, and spirits across time. Christianity, far from being born in a vacuum, emerged within a vibrant world of myth, empire, and ritual. It absorbed, transformed, and reinterpreted the sacred forms it encountered. The old gods were not vanquished. They were transfigured. They survived not as idols, but as saints. Not as temples, but as traditions. Their myths echo in liturgies, their festivals in our calendars, their images behind stained glass and gold leaf icons. This does not make Christianity false. Rather, it makes it human, a reflection of the soul's journey across millennia, constantly seeking the divine through familiar forms. To understand faith is not to deny its ancestors, but to recognize them. In doing so, we may not lose the sacred, but deepen it. So the next time you enter a church, light a candle, or speak a prayer, ask yourself, who are you really addressing? What history speaks through your gesture? And what ancient presence, perhaps forgotten, still listens?